So, this last week, I joined a group of leaders uh, at a dinner, and they had a theme. And the topic was existentialism, which I find very hard to pronounce. And it addresses one of the big questions in life. What gives your life meaning? So, I was at this dinner, and now I've studied philosophy, I've studied theology, and you might think I would know a thing or two about existentialism, but I needed a refresher course before going into the meal. And so maybe you do too. Maybe you're familiar with it, or maybe you aren't. But in a sense, just a very brief way, existentialism, which Søren Kierkegaard, who we did a reading of today, was considered one of the founders of, it's a belief that life doesn't come with built-in meaning. We have to create it through our choices, actions, and relationships. And it's a whole school of psychology. It asks, why are we here and what's the point of it all? So around that table, everybody shared what gave them meaning. And people shared about, and you can think about what you would share if you were at that table. Some people about their family, their creativity, being useful, being connected, being successful, just to name a few. And so when it came to me, it won't surprise you because we talk about it each week. But I talked about life and service to others and aligning myself to what God wants in my life and what's divine providence. And it was really, I was really the only person at this event who had what you would say a traditional spiritual answer. I was like, whoa, really? That's different. That's really unusual. And then slowly, then the next thing the conversation shifted to was the topic of death. And some of the folks at the table were brilliant scientists. They were claiming that within their lifetime will prolong life by hundreds of years. That that's the purpose of that gave them meaning, and it would be technology that would give us essentially eternal life here on Earth. And I talked about being, happy to live as long as I live, and that life continues after death. And that also was a unique position at this gathering. And I did make the point to the group that for the last 4,000 years, people saw it my way, that we were spiritual beings and that there was life after death. And only in the last 150, 200 years is that really an odd way to look at things. So I had a little bit of history on my side, but I was definitely not in the majority of the group there. Um, and then the conversation was just fascinating because it is a fascinating discussion about what gives your life meaning, what's your purpose. It's something we're all asking ourselves. And as I promised today at the beginning of the service, we're going to answer all those questions for you today. So we'll put that whole question to bed. You'll have total knowledge of what the meaning of life is by the end. Um, but one of the folks at the table was a existential therapist, and I asked her, "Why do you think young people today are so anxious? Why are people so anxious?" And she thought that it was two things. One, that they're being asked to perform and achieve at levels that have never happened before. So the pressure on them is intense, that unlike any other generation. And the second was that they've grown up and I have to say this the right way, more self-focused than any generation. So everything is about them. It's on them. And so the two things of pressure to achieve and then focus on yourself, made them very anxious. I added a third thing that I thought, from a spiritual perspective, is that if you don't believe in God, which we're seeing an uptick in faith, but not really for younger people. If you don't believe in God, that means every decision, every life decision is on you. There's nothing, there's no providence, there's no guidance. And it's like everything I do, and that raises the stakes of that whole pressure. Like if I get it wrong. And when I do talk to a lot of younger folks, I do find that pressure with them that they are, if I get this wrong, I'm going to completely screw up my whole life if I don't get into the right school, the right job, the right partner, and so forth. So we talked about the anxiety crisis, and I asked the therapist, "What's your advice to people who are coming in? What's a common bit of advice?" And I was really surprised by her answer. She said, "I tell them to go volunteer at the food pantry." And her point was that the only way that you're going to find meaning and purpose and resolve that anxiety is getting outside of yourself. that service to others is the way back to sanity, and it's the way to make meaning. And this is a really nice intersection where psychology and philosophy and theology, I think, agree. One of the leading writers on this topic is Arthur Brooks. He's at Harvard. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he has written some really great books. And he has, I think, summed up the key elements, the triad that is needed to have meaning in life. And I just want to share what he came up with because I think it's probably the most accurate. He talks about three words: coherence, purpose, and significance. And I want to explore those a little bit. What does that mean? From his perspective, coherence means that you see yourself as something bigger than your own life, and you fit into something bigger than your own life, even when you can't see how. So in our tradition, we would call that divine providence. The second thing is purpose, and that means that your life is trying to accomplish something bigger than yourself. And in our tradition, we'd call that usefulness or being of use. And the third was significance, and that's trusting that your life matters and that the world would be poorer without your contribution. So those are really three interesting pillars, I think, to understand it very succinctly. And what struck me about all three of those was that it involved service to others. Everything was getting outside yourself. And that aligns with what the therapist told people to go volunteer at the pantry, and it also aligns with the teachings of Jesus. Would you like to hear how the teachings of Jesus align with this?
Yeah.
That'd be interesting? Okay. Okay. So Jesus has long before there was existential therapists and Harvard professors, Jesus had some thoughts on this and kind of lined it up very nicely for us. In the theme of coherence, he said, this commandment, you shall love the Lord God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind. So that is, in a way, the simplest sentence that would give your life coherence, understanding that you are part of God's creation and loving that God back. It helps us understand how life fits together, that we're not a random accident in a meaningless universe. And when people say to me, I just can't believe that you believe in all this religious stuff and this God stuff and the superstitious stuff, I think to myself, I can't believe that you look at at life as like, I'll do what I can, I'll get the job, I'll get the career, I'll get the retirement, I'll die, and maybe somebody will read my book. I don't know. That seems stressful to me. So in this coherence, we're all part of creation, and it doesn't depend on you. We all have a small part to play, but we have a part to play, and God can tap into that in our lives. So if you believe in God, you can have a belief, which I hold really important, which is that there's divine providence. There's something flowing in your life, and you can get into that is not all on you. And I do feel like one of the reasons we're so stressed out now is if we don't have that belief, then that does mean we are responsible for everything. And so I watch young people being lectured about climate change. And of course, they're going to be completely stressed out because they're like, you have to solve this. And it just sort of creates anger and resentments. The next pillar was coherence. And on this one, the question is, where do we find that coherence from a spiritual perspective? Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is within you. So this is interesting. Coherence, making sense of things, is found when we look within, not looking outside. It's right here inside. It's the divine love that dwells within us. When we align our hearts with love and even suffering and even confusion, we can begin to make sense of the bigger pattern. While some Christians believe that heaven is something that we achieve as a reward later, that's not accurate. The reality is that we start living in heaven right now, and it's how we live our life. So that's coherence. All right, the second one was purpose. Did you remember that, the purpose? And here Jesus has another commandment. It's actually an extension of the last one. And he said, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. That is how we get to purpose. That's what all these folks were saying about serving others. And Jesus described it very succinctly, saying, whoever wants to be great, you must be the servant. And you remember he famously washed the disciples' feet as his last act on earth? That is the message. Purpose comes when we shift from what can I get to how can I help. When we serve others, anxiety can transform into meaning. When we give, emptiness gets filled. A recent study at Cornell that just came out, I just read this last week. Students were giving small grants of $400 to be of use to others, and they had to do something that mattered. Now, but they could they could use it for anything they wanted. Those who used the money to serve others reported feeling more purposeful, connected, and happy than those who didn't. One student paid for 270 loads of laundry at a community laundromat. Another planted a fruit tree that she said she'll never see bloom. But they said these acts made them feel more alive. So the researcher put it this way: invite people to think about their contribution that they want to make and help them make it, and they'll walk around with greater purpose. And then a psychologist in the study said, stop trying to be happy and start figuring out how to make other people happy. So that's what Jesus taught us. Whoever loses their life will find it. Purpose is found in service. Okay, now, do you want to hear about the third significance? Yes? Okay. Significance is that in your daily life, you realize your life matters. And the teaching from Jesus on this that is, I think, very misunderstood is Jesus said you must be born again. And maybe you've heard people who say, I'm a born again Christian. And what they usually mean, the ones I grew up with, they would say, I had one experience when I was 17, I came to Christ, and then I was saved and was done. But that's a mistaken view of what that means to be born again. Being born again is not a one-time event in our spiritual life. It's a rebirth. And it's every time that we decide to be more loving, more compassionate, more like the person that God created us. We're reborn constantly. We're constantly being challenged into this new life. And significance comes from realizing that those daily choices that we make, they matter. So each day we're being invited to renewed, we're invited to show compassion instead of contempt, we're invited to love and not fear. And I think a great way to start your day, if you're looking for this, is to just say, when you're laying in bed before you get up, how can I be of service to you today, God? What will you present in my life that I need to be of service? So when Jesus was speaking about eternal life, he wasn't talking about something in the future. He was talking about a quality of being right now. So to know God means living a conscious relationship with the divine love that begins now and it grows forever. So your life has eternal significance because the love you bring into the world, it actually never dies. All the acts of goodness that you've done will have a ripple effect that you'll never have any idea. But if you do good, it will have that effect. One test you can give yourself is that it's called, I just made this up. It's a Wonderful Life test. If you know that great movie, one of my favorite movies. What would the world look like if I hadn't lived? Okay, would it be worse for me not being here? Is the world better for me being here? That's the test. We want to leave this world having known that what we did made the world a better place. So that's our significance, is our legacy. Did we make the world better? Now, here's the paradox. Jesus does say that if you want this life, if you want this life of meaning, whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. We have to empty ourselves. We have to surrender. We have to give up control. And we don't find peace by avoiding death or worrying about death. We realize that we will just transition into the next existence. So One of the things I love about our tradition, and it says that salvation doesn't come from what you say, it comes from what you live. It's not really about believing in Jesus or the Buddha or Muhammad or a sacred text. It's about how deeply you live the teachings. How much do you love in your life? Psychology and faith are saying the same thing. Meaning isn't something that you think your way into. It's not something you achieve your way into. It's something you live your way into, and that's through love and service. So if you want a meaningful life, find coherence, love God, and see how you fit into the larger picture. Discover your purpose, love your neighbor, and seek to be useful, and claim your significance. Transform daily and recognize that you have a role to play at every stage of your life. There's a purpose for you in your earthly existence. And if you do those three, then your life will have meaning. Amen. There, problem solved, issue resolved. You now know the meaning of life. Boom, done. Isn't it great coming to Church of the Holy City, get these cosmic questions answered? So, any questions, comments, concerns, thoughts?
Just answering your question. Yes, it is.
Yes, it is great. Nobody answered it here in the service here, so I'm glad you did, Ross.
Oh, yes, it is.
Oh, Jimmy, a little delayed reaction. Jimmy says, yes, it is.
I didn't think it was a question you later.
It was a rhetorical question. No, I was anxious to hear your answer. Any other questions, comments? Okay. The solution to life, the universe, and everything is 42. Does anybody know what she's referring to?
Wait a second. I don't know.
No? Is it a Monty Python reference?
Louise says it's from
think it's-
Hitchhiker's
Hitchhiker's Guide. Yeah. I knew
Yeah,
it was a movie
exactly.
reference. Sounds like Monty Python, but that wasn't a famous movie line. Ellie has her hands up. Mateus has very kindly pointed out, very chivalrous of you to find Ellie's hand up.
Thanks,
Here you
Matthias.
are.
Thank you so much, Rich. This is just so well timed and wonderful. And as one of the young person audience members, I deeply appreciate it. I guess I would love to hear your thoughts. So I completely agree. Our generation is very high pressure, very self-focused. And then it's great to kind of de-emphasize that, but some parts of it in your 20s, I'm in grad school. I don't have a family of my own yet. So by some nature, you are kind of in this stage of pushing and focusing on yourself. And some of that's kind of natural. So what would be a good way to reframe kind of that energy that you are putting toward yourself in a way that feels more purposeful? Does that make sense?
I think so. So you're saying in your 20s, it's going to be natural to be very self-focused.
I think
so-
it seems like some of it is natural in the sense that you're developing your skills as a career. I don't have kids that depend on me yet, for example. So some of it is this energy you're putting toward developing yourself. But I'm wondering if there's probably a way to frame that is also less self-focused though, and that is less anxiety producing and more meaningful. So I'm just curious what you think about that.
I would think that one, I wouldn't take your 20s as all that seriously as you're probably being taught to take it. In other words, I would turn the pressure down a little bit and the focus on, getting it all the way it has to be. So that would be one, which I don't think you're hearing in your 20s right now. And two, I actually do think that getting out of school or whatever you're doing in your 20s and volunteering somewhere, it's also a time when you can volunteer in a way that you won't be able to probably in the future. But going out and volunteering, in my own personal life. So when I was in college, I was very involved with the Newman Center. I volunteered I adopted a grandparent. I was a big brother, did canned food drive and all that. I'm not saying that to brag. I'm just saying that it gave me it. I think it avoided depression for me, honestly. In other words, getting out and doing those acts. And then when I went to graduate school, I would volunteer in a community down in in Roxbury, a Catholic church, so forth. But I think still getting into the habit of getting outside of yourself, even in your 20s, because it does become a habit, and finding ways because otherwise the culture is really locking us into a lot of reasons why each decade we really need to focus on ourselves. And this will be the decade that we focus on that. So I still think there might be some ways to reduce the schools, everything, and so forth, that focus. But you're right that at different stages of your life, it's going to be different for everybody. And God can uniquely show you what could be open for you at that stage of your life. It'll be different than somebody else.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's so helpful. I just saw the book, The Defining Decade, today, which argues that your 20s are like what defines the rest of your life. So this is a helpful counterweight.
Yeah, definitely counterweight, because now we're telling people that it's your defining 6-year-old if they don't get into the proper
exactly.
school, and if they don't get into the proper high school, they won't get into the right feeder school for the right college. If they don't get into the right college, they won't get to the right graduate school. If they don't get to the right graduate school, they won't meet the right spouse, so on and so forth. And then you don't get into the right firm. And then, I'll just say here in DC, you meet a lot of achievers who have hit 40 and 50, and they've been constantly achieving. And they're sort of like, is this all there is? Like, I did it. I hit all those marks. And I was always told that if I hit them, that would be joy. And it didn't, or it doesn't work out that way. So great question. I hope that was a helpful answer.
It was. Thank you.
Oh, good. Natalia? You're on mute.
Oh, yes. Hello, hello, everyone, and hello, Pastor Rich. I just wanted to thank you for this sermon, for the way you presented it. I just want to add a little bit about my understanding of existentialism. I agree with your definition, and you defined existentialism the way it was defined by French philosophers in the middle of the last century. But actually, the broader meaning of existentialism is about concentrating on individual existence and suffering, and there are different varieties, religious and atheistic. And French philosophers, they represented the atheistic existentialism, but there is also religious existentialism, actually, that was represented by Kierkegaard. So, but the main difference of classical philosophy and existentialism in the main point, classical philosophy is concerned with explaining the universe, our place in the universe and outside world, versus existentialism is concentrated on human existence, human suffering, or actually our choices, our joy, and our existence. And for me, growing in being raised in the Soviet Union, it made a lot of sense, because in the Soviet Union, individual existence was not important. It was all about society, about rules and order, but individual existence was ignored, as well as now in Russia. But in the free world, individual existence is central and important, or should be. So I love existentialism in all the varieties that are many. again, it's religious, it's atheistic, it's philosophers who concentrate on suffering, and some of them concentrate on explaining joy, and as many varieties, as many destinies, and many different lives and perceptions. And it's always existed as long as humanity exists, because we all reflect on our existence. And so in a way, we all are existential philosophers in our own life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I was looking it up, it was interesting that Kierkegaard was a Christian, and he's considered the father of it. And it was interesting because he was critical of Swedenborg, and he said that Swedenborg was too idealistic, meaning that he was focused too much on systems and not enough on the inner life. And I think he really missed Swedenborg. Swedenborg was just the opposite. Swedenborg was all about what we talked about today, like the inner life. And Viktor Frankl is also considered one of the leaders of existentialism, and his book, Man's Search for Meaning, is probably one of the best books if you've ever read it. But talks about how do you make meaning when you're in the Holocaust, for example, and has a famous quote that if something to this, I'm not going to quote it completely accurately. If a man has a clear why, he can do any how.
He who has the why to live for can endure almost any how.
Say it again. He who has the why to live for can endure almost any how. So that would be, I would say that the folks that I was talking to were probably more on the secular side of existentialism. But thank you for that. And what a cool community we have, that we have philosophers and theologians right in our midst, and doctors in that field. Did you have a question? And you have a question? So I'll just pass this over to you.
Go ahead.
So Rich, what if I were to argue to you you're wrong, that the meaning of life actually is have as much fun as you can and enjoy as much and collect as much fun experiences as possible, and just like pleasure. Meaning of life is pleasure. Why would I be wrong?
Well, first, you'd be wrong because you didn't listen to my sermon. And for that, I would have to condemn you to hell. So that would be the first thing. But second, that's hedonism, right? I think you're talking about and it's definitely, I would say it's probably the dominant worldview in our culture right now, like get as much as you can. But I think if you just look at any of the studies for people who do that they're unfulfilled, they're unhappy, because we're at a culture right now in the United States where we're at the epitome of what you can get almost anything you want fairly cheaply and have any experience you want. And people are reporting the higher levels of sadness, depression, and anxiety. So that I think it would run that way. But then also your definition of like what is fun. Like I actually think that we should have fun lives. I think that, there will be suffering and there will be tough things to do. But I think that service and love and being here today, for example, that's fun for me. It's enjoyable. It brings me joy. So it depends on also how you describe joy. But I don't think you can. I think that just chasing the thrill. Talk to anybody who does it for a long time as a meaning-making system, and it gets pretty boring. It gets pretty tired, is my experience. Do you agree with me now? All right. Let's go to Matthias. Did you want to go next?
Yeah, thank you, Rich. Yeah, so my question was looking at kind of the younger generation, young people. Do you think that the turn towards God and religion, even on like a systemic level, is kind of a prerequisite to a generation kind of becoming less anxious, but also turning towards like concepts of like the common good and service and all of these things? Like, do you think that has to happen first before we have a generation that is less individualistic? Or do you think that like you could have a kind of like ethos of like service and like public service or things like that emerges that is also secular? So I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
So it's like a chicken or egg thing. Do you have to believe in God first for the next generation to to have an anxious and happy, more fulfilled life, or can they move in that direction? And so I don't know, but I think that I think that they're going to move in that direction first without God, because for them, God is associated with the Christian church and organized religion, which they have a bad experience of. So they're going to find it practically in other ways, but like being of service. And you're going to hear things like forgive people, or you're going to hear the tenets of faith taught, I think, and this generation seems to be embracing it. But what's interesting now is I find among the rising generation, and particularly you can see the data with young men, is that they're actually looking more in a very traditional way. A lot of them, they want a more traditional church, a more structured. So they are now the grandchildren of the people who have lived the, materialistic heights. And I think they're questioning all of that. And they're also not, the promise that the American dream would just be more and more and more and more isn't coming true for them. And so I think they're finding it in other ways. But I think that the pendulum goes back and forth over time. And I think some will find it through God and that will lead them to it. But I actually believe that when you move toward loving your neighbor and your kind, you're also discovering God, though you may not call it that. That's how God works. And so in Swedenborg, he actually says that in the new age, the new period that's coming, that the Christian church will be somewhat bankrupt with the public because of its failure to follow Jesus and changing a lot of Jesus' teachings. That it will rise up among a group of people who are who don't have a faith-based background. That it'll be something different. But yeah, so it's that's why in our tradition we'd say all faith paths are good, or if you're leading a life of love to the neighbor, you're connected to God. I think the hardest part for doing it without God is the idea that I'm in control of this and I'm responsible. And that's still going to create a lot of anxiety because it's either I do it or I fail. Anybody else? Okay, Ellie?
Yeah, I wanted to circle back to Jason's comment to kind of express a different view. So
Yes.
I think he was saying, like, what if the purpose of life is to have fun and like collect interesting experiences? So I am in school at a psychology department right now, and we've actually seen a lot of interesting speakers on this recently. But another branch of research focuses on what is a good life, like what components make that up. And what the research is currently suggesting is that there's kind of different dimensions, but that these dimensions don't contradict each other. You can have a happy life, by which we mean kind of pleasurable, and that can be hedonistically oriented, but it doesn't have to be. Like you said, it was about kind of American consumption, for example, and that can be kind of empty. But also, people cultivate pleasantries and like, beautiful cultural experiences or like spending time with people, etc. The second dimension is having like a purposeful or meaningful life, which we've touched on a lot today and I think is so crucial. And then the third one is a more recent one, which was having a rich life. So that means kind of like collecting interesting experiences, diverse experiences. And all of those are related to people's ratings of their own life satisfaction and like well-being. And they're like orthogonal to each other. So like you can have more of them. That doesn't mean that you have less of one, right? And I think that there's a lot of evidence that all of these things kind of make up a meaningful or a good life. Yeah. So to push back a little bit on that.
Love the pushback. Great insights. And again, what a beautiful community we have of people with such interesting backgrounds and knowledge of this topic. So thank you, Ellie, for that. That was great. Natalia?
Hi. Again, I want to bring a reminder of Ecclesiastes, and it says that it's a gift from God to eat, drink, be joyful, enjoy our life. It's actually our gift, and we should be joyful and happy, and it's not any kind of sin to seek enjoyment as far as it's not harmful to others, I believe.
Excellent. So our two psychology doctors and soon-to-be doctors have weighed in that it's Jason, go ahead, have fun, do what you want, enjoy yourself. Yes.
I have just one more question, just
Go ahead.
A burning question, and that is because we've talked about this before, I think even one-on-one, and your answer has been on terms of what is the meaning of life. I believe you've said in the past, we're here to learn, but I haven't heard you say that today.
Good point. Yeah. I think so today I was focused more on how do you find meaning? And definitely I would say also that the purpose of this is an exercise. So good catch and good point. Yeah, Jimmy?
I have a question and a comment. When I listen to your sermon, what I think about, shouldn't we be living, loving, and learning? That gives us purpose. Would that not be in the same realm of what you're speaking of today?
That would be a much more concise summary of my sermon than my long-winded sermon. It was beautifully said, actually. I like it. I want the bumper sticker. We could have saved a lot of time today had Jimmy preached instead of Rich. No, that's a beautiful way to say it because that brings into what Jason was just talking about, which is learning. Yeah, thank you.
In all the things that we're saying today, it brings together us being able to live, learn, and love.
Live, learn, and love. You heard it from Jimmy Cox. You can get T-shirts at Church of the Holy City, and bumper stickers. We will have those for you. That'd be a good tagline for the church. But that's a very good summary. It's a beautiful summary, and I think we'll leave it there. But what I love about this discussion time is the wisdom of the group and the ideas that people share, and then how people answer other people's questions, and it's just really lovely. It's just a lovely way to engage. So I really appreciate everyone who participated, everyone who listened, and all of you for being here today.